Welcome to Showtime All the Time, podcast number 7. I'm Dennis Bickmeyer, the Executive Director of the Henrico Sports and Entertainment Authority. And this is fun for me because I get to reverse roles with our guest today. He's interviewed me for almost a decade and a half. So now I get to be the interviewer. I see him smiling along there. But I want to welcome award-winning sportscaster, sports journalist Lane Casadonte from WTVR Channel 6 right here in Richmond. Lane, welcome to Showtime All the Time.
Thank you, Dennis. I appreciate it. What if I take your notes? How would that be?
I would be lost. Come on, I don't have 30 years in this business like you do, so you got to cut me a little bit of slack, you know. So you give me some professional development, career.
There'll be a critique after the end.
Sure,
there'll be notes.
Well, all right. I'll look forward to that. But we're going to talk about your career. We're going to talk about the sports landscape here in Central Virginia, and we look forward to hearing your stories and your memories. But like I said, 30 years at WTVR, an amazing career. So take us back. Take us back to the early 1990s from upstate New York, Lane, and boom, you land in Richmond, Virginia. What was it like back then?
Boy, I came down as a news photographer. I wasn't in front of the camera. I was at my previous station, but only because our staff there was so small, I had to do like 4 different jobs. Not unlike what I've done here in the beginning of my career. But I was behind the camera at first. Long story short, they found out that I had a little bit of experience in front of the camera. And one thing led to another. I got to sit in and do a sportscast one night in the middle of the summer. I still remember it was like July 31st. I had been here about 3 or 4 months. Ivan Schwartz was the old sports director at Channel 6 back at the time, and he had seen me on tape from my old station and said, that was pretty good. I said, thanks. Would you ever want to do that here? And I was very political with my answer. I said, I'm perfectly happy with the job that I have. I had been there 3 months. I said, but if the opportunity ever came up, I would appreciate it. And I did one night in July. I had to do another night that October in an emergency situation. They had a situation where there were 2 guys in the sports department at the time. Neither one of them were in the building. It was 5:45. And the sportscast at 6 o'clock at the time was 4.5 minutes, so it wasn't something they could gloss over or something somebody could fake. And I walked into the newsroom, and somebody said, there was a whole group of people. I said, Lane could do it. Get him to do it.
Call the bullpen. Let's go.
They said, I said, what? They said, well, there's nobody in the building to do sports. And I'm wearing a sweatshirt and jeans, and I'm ready to go out and shoot a story that night. I had to borrow a shirt from one reporter, a jacket and a tie from a second reporter, makeup from a third female reporter. And I walked out on the set, and Angie Miles was the anchor that night. She was pregnant with her first child, who is now out of college. And her eyes got the size of that Henrico logo on the wall. And she said, what are you doing? And I said, I'll explain later. Did the show. There was a story that they had already put together. I tossed to that. I grabbed a story off of our fax machine, which tells you how long ago it was. 2 stories off the Associated Press wire that I kind of ad-libbed on the set and then tossed to the story. Got off, said to my reporter, we were going to be very late. I said, let me go get changed. We'll get out of here. The executive producer looked at me and said, no. I said, what do you mean no? He said, go home and get your own clothes. You're doing the 11.
Let's go.
I was full-time in the sports office 2.5 months later.
That's fantastic. See, we all need those breaks, right? But those are the stories.
When preparation meets opportunity, that's what luck is.
There you go.
So in that case, yes, I've been very lucky.
So staying on that, though, so now the 90s and the 2000s, and here you are. What's kept you ingrained in this business, and what's kept you committed to your craft to continue to tell these stories of athletes and coaches and events? What is that thing for you? 2
things. Number one, I've wanted to do this job since I was like 7. Everybody, the kids, little kids, we all did it. We all dream of hitting the home run or scoring the touchdown. Well, I did that too, but I also used to fantasize that I was Brent Musburger and Bob Costas and Bryant Gumbel, the guys that I watched growing up. I used to pretend I was the guy on TV. And the second thing is I only know one way to do this job. So it's kind of like being an athlete, being a public servant, firefighter, police officer, if it's something inside of you, it's not so easily dismissed. This is just what I've always wanted to do. And fortunately, I found a place that appreciates what we do on a regular basis. So that's, my wife asks the same questions. Like, I never thought I'd be running up and down sidelines when I turned 50. Well, that's in the rearview mirror, and I'm still doing it. And I told her, I said, I only know one way to do the job. I can't do it a different way.
We're going to talk about that presence on the sidelines here in a couple of minutes, but we're going to get to some of your stories. But the storytelling overall, one of the segments that you guys are really known for at Channel 6 is beyond the roster, right? Make sure I got that right. Is that where the storytelling, is that where Beyond the Roster really came from?
It was I had done like maybe 2 or 3 of those longer feature stories a year when we found a good story. And they're not easily done because they take a lot of time. They take more time than the average story because we put a little more into it and you tell more of a story. Our assistant news director at the time, a girl named Misty Davidson, who has worked there almost as long as I have, she came to me and proposed, hey, do you think you could find enough stories to do one a week? I said, yeah, we're always getting these stories. We just never have the time to do them. And I made a couple of demands. I said, okay, I can do them, but you need to give me time to do them, and I need a little bit of help. And they said, done. So that was 2018. So we have done them for almost 6 years now. And there are so many stories in this area. And then there are stories of people who were in this area and have gone on and done other things. We're still turning them down sometimes because there's just so many of them. But there are certain criteria that I look for when I can tell that something is going to be a good story. And there's so many of them. I got a backlog. I'm probably shooting parts of 3 of them next week alone just because of timing and opportunity and the stories that you get to tell. There's hundreds of stories around here.
And speaking of that, so we're going to hear a couple. I want to hear Lane's Hall of Fame of stories if you got a couple of them. But when you think about it, though, your coverage extends beyond Central Virginia, obviously. You've touched all corners of the Commonwealth of Virginia. You've been all over the country following teams that have, whether they've gone on to NCAAs or covering Super Bowls and things like that. I'm not sure if you've been international with any teams or any athletes.
Not yet.
We've got some Olympians around here and stuff. But so what's on the Lane Hall of Fame list of all-time stories?
Oh, man. It's like trying to choose between your kids. Now, the stories that I'll give you a generic answer. The stories that I like are ones where you can introduce the subject and you can get the audience interested or behind them for something that they've done. Now, the typical story is, hey, this kid runs fast in track. There was a story we did just a couple of weeks ago. This kid's really good at track, and he does this and he does that. The stories that I like are the ones where you can get the audience interested and then turn it on them and tell them something that they wouldn't have expected. Right. Story we did, a young man a couple weeks ago. He runs track for Banner Christian School, small private school in the area. He is among the fastest hurdlers in Virginia. Looking to, if he lowers his time just a little bit, he's going to get Power 5 schools offering him scholarships. Nice. And he has the Olympics. He has the 28 Olympics in L.A. as a goal. And people say, yeah, if he works hard, and he could do it. He's that good. Well, Banner Christian has a track team of exactly one person. He's out there practicing by himself. He goes to meets by himself. That gives you a different perspective on what he's accomplished. Those are the stories I like, is when you can get somebody interested and then turn it on them a little bit. I always, what I run through my mind is, would my wife or my daughter be interested in this? They're not your traditional sports fans. But if I tell them this story, can I keep their interest for like 3 or 4 minutes? And if I think they'd be interested in it, then I know it's a decent story. Because our goal, obviously, we get the sports fans. We've got them. You want to introduce and, kind of inform other people that wouldn't normally pay attention to what you do.
Right. That's an interesting story as well on the hurler, because yours truly was a one-person cross-country team in high school. We didn't have a cross-country team, and fortunately I was able to train and go to meets with a public high school across the street. So I owe a lot to them. They took me in as one of their own. So that's pretty good. So good luck to that young man. Is there an event that you haven't covered that you want to cover?
Yeah, the Masters. I haven't been to Augusta yet.
Fantastic.
I thought I had a chance. Lanto Griffin, who played at VCU, won an event 2 years ago and obviously gets your first invitation to the Masters when you win. And I tried to get a badge, and a media badge. This was during COVID, though, so they were really cutting down on the number of people that could get there. And the Masters isn't around the corner, and it's not a cheap trip. So we were trying to just have a real local angle to be able to get there. John Rollins, who played at VCU 20 years ago, he had played there once, but the timing didn't work out. That's probably the one place I've never been that I would like to see in person.
We've played golf together. Neither of our games are going to get us an invite to the Masters either. So that's out. So, I'd love to be able to take you to the Masters, but my game just won't allow it. So how about an athlete? Is there an athlete that you haven't interviewed that you would really like to interview?
That's a good question. I've never interviewed Michael Jordan, and I would love to pick his brain about just certain things. Maybe even I'd love to pick his brain about NASCAR, because now that he's owned a team with Denny Hamlin and they're successful,
and
they're winning, and they're doing all this stuff, and I know of his background with the sport. But I'd really love to sit down and ask him more about, because he came to races at Richmond.
Absolutely.
His father used to bring him up to, and I would just love to know some of the tracks he went to, some of the interactions he might have had where people, imagine if he ran into Cale Yarborough when he was 6 or 7 years old. And, can you imagine a picture of Cale Yarborough with a 7-year-old Michael Jordan? That would just be, one of the holy grail of sports memorabilia. But I'd love to pick his brain about that. There's a few people that we don't get to talk to very much that I'd love to sit down and ask them anything else other than what was the story? Oh, I just did a story last week with Joe Bamaseal, who the guard at VCU.
Yeah.
And we did a story about he's developed an app, social media app for mental health awareness, as the trials and tribulations that he's been to. We sat down and talked for almost an hour. I didn't ask him a single basketball question. Now, we did it inside of a basketball gym, but after it was over, I stopped and I said, you know what? I didn't ask you a single basketball question. He goes, that's the point.
Yeah. And how are you going to cut up an hour?
Yeah, I know. Your guy here is about to find out once we get done with this.
Yeah, well, and so I want to go back because we did touch on racing there for a little while. Obviously, that's one of our main connecting points. Going back to Lane's Hall of Fame story, you said you had an Earnhardt story?
Oh, yeah, I do. Dale Earnhardt made me a much better interviewer. This was the 90s.
I'm afraid where this might
go.
No.
Actually, I have two Earnhardt stories, one that happened to me and one that didn't. But I always found Dale Sr., and I don't know how many interactions you had with him beforehand, I always found him in a group, he owned the room. One-on-one, he was very, I don't want to say nervous, but apprehensive. Reserved,
yeah.
Kind of wouldn't look you in the eye, shifted his feet.
Yeah.
He was very uneasy when you just talked with him one-on-one.
When he's on, he's on.
When he's on, he's on. This was the 96 or 97 Daytona 500. Before he won, he finished second again. And for those of you watching who don't know how the end of a race works, the top 5 drivers, the winner goes to victory lane. The next 4 finishers, 2 through 5, all line up on pit road, and the media gets a chance to talk to them. It's mostly for national television, national radio. You'll see it if you watch it on TV. They'll interview the winner, then they'll go to the guys that finished 2 through 5. Well, Dale was there, did a very quick interview with probably
radio,
ESPN back in the day, did CBS, did MRN. Wasn't happy because he had lost again, finished second or third again, and took off. And I watched him, and he was walking back towards the haulers in the old Daytona before they revamped it. And he's by himself. And I grabbed my photographer. I said, let's get him. There was nobody there, so we catch up to him. And we tried to do what we call a walk and talk, which is where you see the reporter walking along. I've done them by myself with a camera. It's very difficult to walk backwards, not trip over anything, and at the same time keep a usable shot of the interviewee And my photographer that was a female, Stacy Brand, who worked with us a long time ago. She did it, and it was usable. But I got up to him, and I asked him something cute. I said something along the lines of, if this is the Daytona 501, would you have won? Because he was closing on the winner. Now, if you think about it, this guy just lost out again on the one thing he wants more than anything in his chosen sport.
And had won everything else there.
And had won 20 times at the track. And he could have bitten my head off and gotten away with it. He just smirked at me over his mustache and through his glasses and just said, "Race is over, man." And in that moment, it hit me, and I said, that was stupid. You're wasting this guy's time. So then I asked him a better question about winning a 7th champion or an 8th championship, which really is what he wanted. You know, you ran very well here. How will this set you up for the next few weeks? You come to Richmond in 2 weeks. I asked him a better question. He gave me a fantastic answer. By the way, never broke stride and didn't stop walking.
And no one tripped and fell. Or anything,
no one tripped, not that time. But it taught me that don't waste their time. You want a good question. You want a good answer, ask a good question. And I've always remembered that ever since then. And unless I have that type of relationship with the interviewee, I never waste their time. My first question is always going to be the absolute first thing I want to know.
That's great.
And I said that when we had a chance to interview Dale Jr. at Richmond a few years ago. We all had a chance to talk with him, and I said, your dad once taught me a very important lesson. And I use that to say, when you hear his voice in your head, what is he telling you? And he gave me a fantastic insight into that as well.
That's great. That's great. You said you had 2 Earnhardt stories. Was there a second one on there?
The second one didn't happen to me. It happened to Steve Sands, who is with NBC Sports and the Golf Channel right now. And Steve was doing a live report. Steve and I used to work for the same small station in upstate New York. And Steve had Dale Earnhardt live at the opening of some Chevy dealer up there. And Steve has all his notes in front of him like you do. And Steve had been in the business, less than 18 months.
Same.
He's nervous as anything because he's got Dale Earnhardt Sr. sitting right next to him. And he's got his notes and he's going, da-da-da. And they give him a countdown from the camera. Okay, 10 seconds. 5, 4. The guy gets to 3. Dale reaches over, grabs his notes and throws them. Cue. And Steve just goes, and he had to wing it. And then he and Dale had a conversation because it wasn't scripted, it wasn't rehearsed, and Dale didn't know what was coming. Steve didn't know what he was going to ask him. And when they were done, Steve, they got through it, and Steve looked at him and said, "Why did you do that?" He goes, "Man, you were too uptight. Had to loosen you up a little bit."
Well, thank you for giving me my notes back. No, I love that story. That's awesome. I actually have to go to my notes because I mentioned award-winning, right? 6 times Virginia Sportscaster of the Year, multiple Emmys, and Virginia Association of Broadcasting Awards. So congratulations.
Thank you.
All well-deserved. And I mentioned the sidelines. You mentioned the sidelines as well. You're a fixture on the sidelines, covering preps. Talk about the importance of that to our local community.
You can't get it anywhere else. We don't do NBA. We don't do NHL. The only NFL we do is the Commanders. The only other real national sport that we cover with any regularity is NASCAR because it comes here every year. You can get that someplace else. What you can't get is high school football highlights on Friday night. And it's huge around here.
Right.
You can go to any game and you will have an average of 1,500 to 2,000 people every Friday night watching a game. I have a couple retirees that live down the street from me. Now, why would they have any reason to watch our
Who
football
you covering
show?
tonight?
Yeah. Their son played at Atlee, is Tyler Warren, who's a tight end for Penn State right now, and they're in it. They're bought in.
Yeah.
And even though their grandson doesn't play anymore, they're still interested because they were a part of it and they like to see how the team and the athletes are doing. But you can't get it anywhere else. So why not go? They put in just as much time, just as much effort. So why not go do it? It's too easy to do. And then the problem that we have with it though is time and resources. We cover roughly 60 schools in Central Virginia here. So how many teams is that? How many athletes? We get to what we can get to. It's far short of what we'd love to get to, but we do what we can.
No, that's great. And kind of keeping things close to home. What we do in the area of sports tourism, it's been around for a long time, but it has this brand now, sports tourism, and there's a huge focus on it locally and throughout Virginia and really and nationally. What are your thoughts on the growth of sports tourism and what's kind of happening in the youth travel market, and where do you see this from a sports broadcast perspective?
It's from not just where I sit professionally, but also personally with people that I know, like you, and I've got friends back home, and their kids are in it. It's intense, and the kids that are in it are really into it, and it's big money, and they will travel all over the place. And if you guys in this Richmond area can give them some sort of centralized location with fantastic opportunity and facilities, and everybody can come in. I know you have this stat off the top of your head. What percentage of the country is within a day's drive of Richmond?
Oh, what is it? It's 50% of the
I think
U.S.
I think it's more than that. 50% of the U.S. population is within a
24-hour drive. Yeah.
Right. So it's I can appreciate it because I know the time and the effort that the kids put into it, and more importantly, that the families put into it. We're going to do a story tomorrow night on a young man who just went to the UCI World BMX Championships.
Oh, wow.
He qualified 2 years ago to go to France, but his mother couldn't drive there. He didn't know why his mother couldn't drive there. He said, well, the bridge isn't finished yet.
That's right.
But she couldn't go to France, but she has driven all over the country because this kid wins. He has trophies that are taller than he is.
Wow.
He doesn't even take trophies anymore because they have no room for him in the house. But it's big. It's big for the people that are involved. It's big for the kids. It's big for the parents. It's big for the officials. And you would like to see those opportunities turn into bigger opportunities in high school and college for these kids.
That's exactly it. I mean, I think it is big business, but there's also you're creating this pipeline of athletes to play in facilities, like we have at the Henrico Sports and Events Center. But then also for middle school and high school, and if you can build that pipeline of players, it's really really important. So I appreciate you saying that. All right, so hard hitting interviewer question right here. You ready for this one? This is all right. This one, drum roll or whatever. What are the big headlines that will be happening in Central Virginia sports over the next couple of years?
Well, with college sports, it's all the NIL and transfer portal, and the way the NCAA and schools are going to have to address athlete compensation in the next couple of years.
Something's breaking daily.
Every single day, which is almost why you just want to put it aside, because there are still lawsuits that are pending, there are still lawsuits that are active. Nothing is going to be settled until all the lawyers get paid. But the thing that jumped out at me yesterday was the ACC and the Big Ten have settled in this case that's going on, which all started with the kid from UCLA, Ed O'Bannon, when he saw his image on the EA Sports, the NCAA game. And he's like, wait a minute, how can they do that? That was over 10 years ago. Or more. So we've been dealing with this for well over a decade, and there's no real conclusion in sight until everybody gets satisfied. I think the players and the athletes should be careful what they wish for, because you need to think all of this through. If you want to be an employee as opposed to being a student athlete, there are going to be different ramifications, expectations involved with that.
Especially if you go from one school to another, or you switch jobs. I hate to put it in air quotes like that, but
just be careful what you wish for. And at some point, and I understand why this is going to sound a little naive. At some point, you got to consider academics. If there's a reason they're going to college in the first place, there should be, half a reason they're going.
There is student in front of that name,
There's
right?
student athlete. But I also noticed that there was a list yesterday that I saw of the money that all the conferences are going to lose in this settlement. how much per school in each conference. That immediately got me to thinking about VCU and Richmond. And okay, you no longer have this much money. How does that affect your program? Okay, in the long run, maybe this gets resolved and it's better for everybody. But in the current time, if you take away, I can't remember what the number is, let me just say $100,000 from VCU's budget for next year, how does that affect VCU? It's a smaller school, right. Smaller budget. How does it affect Richmond? How is it going to trickle down to everybody, and what does it mean in the near future that they can and can't do in regards to the resources that they need to have to put on as good of a program as they do? Nobody knows. So that's going to take a lot of the focus on everything. And we're already, for a little less heavy-handed, we're already getting set for Final Score Friday for this fall. I'm working on our cheerleading squads for the show already because I got to get people before they leave for the summer so I can get it all set up. This will be our 30th year of that too.
That's amazing. That's amazing. So you touched on what's happening on the college landscape, but then again, I look across the squirrels and facility development and things that are on the horizon here. I get frustrated, and I've been when people say that Richmond's not a good sports town. It frustrates me because I kind of look at it maybe with a different set of eyes. I'm a Steelers fan. You're a Steelers fan. People are passionate about their teams. Maybe we don't have an NBA or an NFL franchise here. I don't think that needs to define your community. Like, we've got some really good sports here. We've got some really passionate sports fans here. What's your perspective on the sports fan base here?
Well, it depends on how you define what a sports town is. Like, is it one that would be able to support a pro franchise, or is it one that just appreciates what they have? I mean, look at the Squirrels with the facilities that they have, and they're out drawing almost every minor league team in the country. Bigger market, smaller market, bigger level, lower level. They're still drawing people in because they've made it an event.
That's right.
It's not necessarily a game. Half the people that go to the Diamond could care less what happens in between the lines. Did they win? Did they lose? I don't know. It was a good time. That's what you tell me. That's exactly what you're aiming for.
Yeah, I think you're exactly right. I mean, I think there's the entertainment side of sports, and people want value for the price that they pay for their admission. So there's you're always trying to deliver value to your fans and to your guests. But I just and maybe it was some of the racing in me, the NASCAR in me early on, just the passion that those folks have around their sport. But when I got here, I just felt this sense of, people really love their sport or their team, no matter where they were located. And quite frankly, you see a lot of, gear and stuff from teams in New York or Boston. It doesn't matter, but I think it adds to the fun of it all.
I judge it by the mailbox flags. All the different schools and
flags,
teams I see on a mailbox flag just in my own neighborhood. I'll see, walk the dog, I'll see 24 different colleges represented on the bottom of mailboxes.
Yeah, absolutely. And
I got 2 under mine.
Yeah, there you go. I've got one and one on the way.
One on the way.
That's right. So, well, I appreciate the storytelling, but one part of our segment that we always do is a little bit of show and tell as well. So we asked our guests to bring in something that has some personal, professional meaning. So what have you brought to share?
I've got 2 things.
All right.
Two presentations, and I'm going to apologize to our good friend Spencer because this one is really small.
That's right. I've challenged him with stuff like that.
So. I'm going to hold that up. This is it's a lapel pin. I'm going to let him take a picture of it. And it has on it the logo of the Baseball Hall of Fame. And it says Jackson, 1993. When I grew up 25 minutes from Cooperstown. And the market that I first started in was it's a town called Utica. Halfway between Syracuse and Albany. Cooperstown is part of that market. And for a couple of years before I started in the business, our sports guy was a guy named Rob King who taught me quite a bit about doing this for a living. He would go down to the inductions every year. And they give out these pins, or they used to anyway, to the media. And he had a standing offer from one of our viewers of no questions asked, $400 for the pin if Rob didn't want it every year that he went. Now, in the early 90s in Utica, New York, $400 was a paycheck.
No doubt.
That's what we got every week. So Rob would sell them, but the 1 year, I only got to cover the inductions 1 year, and it was the year Reggie went in. Now, Reggie, for a kid growing up in New York and learning to play baseball in the late 70s, Reggie was the guy. And I taught myself to hit left-handed because Reggie hit left-handed, and I got credible at it. And I got to interview him. It's the only time I've ever been nervous interviewing anybody. Was Reggie was at the old fairgrounds over at the Raceway Complex for one of the card shows. And I got to interview him all by myself. And I asked him a couple of questions. And literally, this was maybe a year or two after I'd been here. I was very young in the business. But it's the only time I've ever done this. After I got what I needed, I pulled the camera away and I said, Mr. Jackson, I just wanted to let you know that I'm a lifelong Yankee fan. I grew up watching you. I taught myself to hit left-handed, and it's an honor to meet you. That's the only time I've ever said anything like that. And I walked away shaking. That's the only time. And I've interviewed a whole mess of people.
That's fantastic.
So that's the pin I kept from when Reggie was inducted.
That's fantastic. I love it. And so one thing I do love about this, and we're going to get to item number 2 for you too, is I get to share some things from, again, my 30-plus year career in this. So since you brought up Reggie Jackson, this will blow your mind because I know you don't know this about me. I was once in an episode of Suddenly Susan that Reggie Jackson was on. Go back and Google it. I got the script that Reggie signed it and everything.
You didn't have any lines.
No, I was just in a restaurant that he was in. So
that's
really long story short is Rod Carew's agent. When I worked for the Angels, Rod Carew's agent was like an executive producer on the Suddenly Susan show, and
because it's L.A. Yeah, of course he is.
And Reggie was going to be on it, and so Tim Meade, who's a longtime PR guy, Tim's really well known, and Rod's agent says, "Hey, Reggie's going to be on the show. I need some people to just come up and hang out with him and kind of keep him calm because it's a long day." So Tim and I go up there and we sit around, and next thing you know, they give us jackets and send us into this restaurant scene that Reggie's in with Brooke Shields and stuff. So anyway, it's kind of a cool moment.
That's
I got
awesome.
the signed script in my bar area at my home. So.
Well, we a long time ago, we were waiting out a rain delay at the Diamond, and there were 3 or 4 of us sitting up in the press box of the Diamond, which looks exactly the same today as it did 25 years ago, I might add.
Sorry, Barney.
Yeah, sorry about that. But we were talking about some baseball-related thing, and there were scouts that would always come up in there, and sometimes you knew them, sometimes you didn't. I once ate lunch up there on a Sunday afternoon. I once had macaroni and cheese with Willie Stargell.
Oh, chicken on the hill with Will.
One of us was really hungover that morning, and it wasn't Willie Stargell. But anyway, we were going back and forth about this baseball issue, and one of the scouts up there was like, "Really?" And he started asking us questions about this, and he was getting into it with us. How come you think this? And have you considered this? And what about this? We ended up talking with this guy for an hour. None of us knew who he was. It was Tommy John.
Jeez.
One of those nondescript guys that if you weren't a diehard fan, you wouldn't recognize him. But he was the nicest guy and just picked our brains as much as we picked his. Had I known it was him, this is before cell phones, obviously, and we not allowed to ask for autographs, but it's Tommy freaking John. I had a million things I wanted to ask him. My dumb butt didn't know who he was. So if Tommy John ever sees this, I apologize, sir.
And don't ask him about the surgery either. So
he should be in the Hall of Fame, though.
That's right.
Well, first of all, he won 288 games, played for 25 years, and he had no guarantee that surgery was going to work. He just did it because, well, whatever. I'm going to pitch it. I'm not going to pitch if I don't have it done. So and now it's called Tommy John surgery. He should be in Cooperstown.
No, that is actually a really good point. And again, all these connections. You mentioned my guy Willie Stargell. I grew up an hour from Pittsburgh. I grew up, watching
the family,
watching Willie play. Yeah. Hey, they won 2 World Series in the 1970s, both against the Orioles. How about that?
1970, 1979.
That's right.
That's right. Okay, the other 2 things that I have here, and you were kind enough to mention some of the honors that I've been fortunate enough to receive. I have a quiz for you.
Uh-oh.
Can you tell me what this is without reading?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. the Edward R. Murrow Award of Excellence.
It's a National Edward R. Murrow Award. Yes,
Okay.
they give out about 12 of these every year in different. This is for sports reporting, obviously, and we won that for a story that I did about Kevin Grayson, who was a football player at LC Bird and the University of Richmond, and also played professionally in Italy. He would have played in the NFL, except he hurt his knee when he was a senior at Richmond and never got the opportunity. But he had played at all three levels. And this was back in, the date says 2014, so this would have been 2013. This was right about the time that Jason Williams came out as openly gay in the NBA. And at the time, everybody was kind of going back and forth and arguing, gay player, baseball, yeah, but it would never work. Mm-hmm. Absolutely, there couldn't be a gay player in football. And I thought, well, I know one. And Kevin deserves all the credit for being strong enough and brave enough to tell his story to us, because there were members of his own family that did not know until they saw the story. And I had known Kevin since he was at LC Bird. He's a fantastic young man. They're all young to me. But he had the guts to tell his story. And he came back to me like 3 weeks later and actually thanked me because he said it's the best thing he had ever done.
That's great.
Now that's what that's for. Now, you got that
storytelling,
one, right?
storytelling.
You got that one written. But now, you know what this is?
That's an Emmy.
It is. That's for a story we did on Sep Shiree, a football player at Atlee, the young man with cerebral palsy that scored the touchdown, ran 60 yards for the touchdown, I think, back in 2018. Mm-hmm. Lived around the corner from me, actually. Nice. Went to the University of Alabama. Fantastic young man. But can you tell me what these two have in common? And this is a lesson that I give to, I don't get to talk to kids at schools very often, but when I do, I ask them this question.
What they have in common?
Aside from the fact that they're both awards.
Got me, man. What is it?
I am going to put these back in my bag, and they're going to stay there the rest of the day, because neither one of them is going to help me do what I got to do today.
Great point.
Awards are nice. Anybody that tells you awards don't matter, they've either got a bunch of them or they don't have any. It's always nice to be recognized for your work outside of someone that you're not related to, right, or your boss or an underling or something like that, but none of them help you do what you got to do today. I got to go into, I can't take this, say to my boss, I won this 10 years ago. I don't feel like working today. You know what they're going to say? Sorry, back to your office. Yeah. You're on at 6:15. You better be there.
I like that approach.
It's you ask me how I keep doing this. Mm-hmm. I have like 4 or 5 deadlines a day, and 6:15, 11:15 come at the same time every night.
And a lot of people calling you to that one coverage as well. So
I love it. I like it when they call. I can't always make them understand why we can or can't be somewhere, but it just shows that they're interested, they're passionate, and they're trying to advocate on behalf of somebody else. And you can't fault anybody for that.
Well, I can't match those last couple of stories, because those were great stories and very deserving of the accolades that they have. So I have 2 things. Pulled this out, just a picture of me and a friend of mine, Eric, and Jim Nance. I've always enjoyed Jim Nance on the air.
I got to meet him.
And he's a CBS guy.
Yep, I got to meet him first time in 2009 at the National Sports Media Awards. He was the keynote speaker. Handed me my first Sportscaster of the Year award from that organization. Couldn't have been a nicer. The exact
fantastic.
Same guy you see on TV, yep. Same guy in person.
Yeah, so I've crossed paths with him. This was in Southern California, but crossed paths with him from my NCAA Big West Conference days and NCAA tournament. I missed him on a tournament this year, by the way. I missed his voice. There was something missing from the NCAA tournament this year, and it was Nance. But I love him on the NFL and golf, and then I'm an old PR guy. So I pulled out some old media guides from back in the day. There's an Angels media guide from 1998. Was this one a Ducks one from the 99-2000 season? An old racing one from my, at that time, California Speedway days. And so, our PR job was to make Lane's life like really easy to do his job.
As easy as possible.
We worked and worked hours on ends to put. Months.
Nobody does them anymore.
I was just going to make that point. It's like, you know how much time and money we spent on these things, and they were outdated the very first game that was played.
That's right. Yes. Yeah, and they're all digital now.
Yeah.
I can't
so
tell you that. There might be 2 schools, I think, that put out any kind of what do they call it? Not a media, well, kind of a media guide for football or anything like that, but that's it. We used to have a whole stack of them every year. Now everything's digital.
But this goes back to what I was just saying a minute ago about your phone ringing and people calling you and people like me calling the pitch stories and stuff. So come on, how about a shout out for the old PR folks out there? It's relationships. Yeah, you've worked with some good ones.
I probably text the guys that are doing it now, Phil Stanton and Brian Deere up at Randolph Banking, Chris Kowalczyk over at VCU, Jason Vita and Christian over at U of R, all of them. I text them probably 3, 4, 5 times a week. The folks over at the racetrack, the folks at Virginia Tech, UVA, everything. Yeah. We come to rely on them, and they actually, and you're right, you have to build a relationship, because that's how we find out things. But there are certain things. I texted with someone the other day, just trying, and I always have to say this is just for planning information mostly. What I got to get prepared for stuff. And it's like, well, keep it under your hat, and we always do, but you can't get that unless they trust you and unless they know why you're asking for something. No,
that's exactly right. So no, it was a great start of my career in the PR world, and I guess you're probably never really out of it, right?
Always. I keep all the credentials I have.
Oh, yeah. So actually, that was going to be my third thing. I'm saving those for another show, because I actually have boxes of credentials, and I actually threw one in the car, but I went with these 2 items instead. But at some point, I'll pull out just what's in one box. It's amazing the amount of credentials that we've accumulated.
I've tried to keep the first one of every event that I've been to. Like, I have the first credential from a race at Richmond I covered, which was March of 95. And I don't know if you remember this, 95, you weren't in NASCAR yet in 95, were you? Mm-mm. In 95, Michael Waltrip drove for the Stavola brothers and Pennzoil Racing. He drove the number 30 car back then. And they had a shtick that they did that season where they invited a member of the media to be a member of his pit crew. Mike Tirico did it at Daytona that year. They asked me to do it at Richmond.
You're the sign guy?
Close, the water.
Oh, okay.
When they used to have to, because you're only allowed to have so many guys over the wall in a pit crew. And I had this long pole with a little basket that looked like a beverage carrier you get at Chick-fil-A when you get 2 drinks. They hand it to you. It was on a pole, and you had to go over, you had to wait for the tire changer to go by, and then lean it across and get it into a little triangular window that was about this big, between the netting and the car frame. And we got a story out of that, and it was my first introduction into how fast things happen in the pits. Like, you watch it on TV and you're like, oh wow, that look at all that they're doing. When you're standing there, it's twice as fast, twice as loud, and 3 times as intense. And that's why I always tell people, if you have never been to a professional sporting event, football, baseball, auto racing, anything, you're right here. You never been to a NASCAR race? Go see it in person. Yeah. At least to say that you saw it once, because it's completely different to watch in person.
No, that's exactly right. So we're getting down to the end. I want to say thank you.
Thank you for having me.
I hope you continue to do this for many, many more years. I appreciate your professionalism. I appreciate our working relationship, and certainly our friendship. So I'm going to give you the last word. What do you want to wrap up with?
Oh, boy. Well, just congratulations on that facility over in Virginia Center. I know I told you that I used to be Sears, and we used to go over there to get something for our cars, and I can't remember what, but we would always go to Sears for it. And it's part of what I tell the kids that we work with, how things were when I first started here.
Back in the day.
Most of them, half of them weren't even born yet. But to see what is possible, and to see the vision that the county had and then brought you in, and to make a vision concrete and actually tangible, doesn't happen a lot. Doesn't always happen the way you want it to, doesn't always happen the way you think it will. So what you guys have been able to do, which I hope is a precursor and a foreshadowing towards many, many bigger things.
More to come.
But it's possible. And you guys, I don't think you could fully appreciate how necessary it was for that project to come to fruition in this area. And for it to be successful, for it to work, for it to fill the purpose and the role for which it was designed. It's huge. So congratulations on that. Everybody should take it as an example. This is what's possible. And now the rest of us can't wait to see what comes next, not just from you, but from everybody.
Yeah, exactly.
That's a standard. Everybody jump up to it.
That's exactly. And thank you for saying that and recognizing that. And it's been such a fun project. And like I said, many more to come. So thank you. We also have a gift for our guests. So you can think of us with your morning coffee or tea or beverage of choice. So a little Showtime all the time.
Actually, you know what? The stress ball is going to come in more handy.
I didn't stress you out that much.
No, not interview, you. Trust me. Not you. I'm going to have 2 kids in college this fall.
Yeah,
so
yeah. So wise.
One in New York City, so that this is going to come in very handy.
Well, good. Don't break anything. But, well, again, thank you. And before we close, thank you for watching, everyone. We appreciate it. You want more information on the Henrico Sports Entertainment Authority, everything that's going on at the Sports Center. As Lane mentioned, go to our website, henricosea.com. Thank you for watching.